The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit, and the man who is joining me this week seems to be drinking some sort of floor wax. Mm-hmm. His name is Mike Roth.
It's actually lemon-scented bleach. It's,
it looked like Pine Sol from over here.
Sorry, I forgot where I was.
Kind of. I can smell colors. I know that.
It's very. I didn't have any caffeine today, so
getting it all in right now.
You know, when you don't have caffeine for a while, some people get those headaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to get that in late in the day, though.
I want to be awake all night. I want to be all squirrely for work tomorrow.
Oh, man. This week we have a plethora of movies to talk about, and I'm going to let you go ahead and get us started with the film that we found in the old red box.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Becky actually made this year, which is crazy. A teenager takes a weekend to the lake house. Her mother died maybe a year ago. Mm-hmm. And the father, played by Joel McHale as Jeff, he has kind of a surprise. He's not selling the summer house, which Becky is really thankful for. What she's not thankful for is he's bringing his soon-to-be new wife and her son into the summer home so everybody could kind of have a fun weekend together. Yeah. Becky's not ready for this at all, and she is becoming very moody about the situation. She's a 13-year-old girl, still heavily in grieving process. She feels this is very insensitive, so she separates herself from the family, which is good, because this is when extremely white power evil group, which surprisingly played by Kevin James, which he's never played a villain before. He's never even done a dramatic role before. And he chooses to do his first one with a swastika on the back of his head, which is a bold move for Kevin James.
I don't think Doug from King of Queens would have the swastika.
No, and crazy thing, I just watched his stand-up the night before. Very clean guy. And then he comes in just murderous. Breaks out of prison, and he's looking for a key. We don't know the importance of this key.
No, we don't.
If you feel like you're going to learn, you're not. But it is extremely important. One thing I did not mention is Jeff's wife, or soon-to-be wife, Kayla, played by Amanda Brugel, she is black, and that causes even more problems when white supremacists break into your home after killing a bunch of kids and adults.
Yeah.
They figure out eventually that Becky must have the key because they hid the key somewhere in the house and it's not there anymore, and they go on a hunt to find Becky. Mm-hmm. There's some personal reasons Becky wants to kill them. I'm not going to spoil it, but one by one, Becky plucks off white supremacists with great anger.
I mean, she channels a little Kevin McAllister. We're setting booby traps.
Yeah.
It's also a little bit of Hannah as the young girl who's very good at killing people in very gory ways.
I feel like this was a lot like Home Alone in a lot of ways. She just kind of makes things and
she's pretty good.
Dispatches people with it. And that is the fun part. I was surprised that there's actually two comedic actors in this film, and there is no humor
not a lot of
at
laughs.
all. This is a very gory film, and it is an action horror, not an action comedy. So when you see Kevin James and Joel McHale on there, don't think you're going to be laughing your way through
No chuckles.
This one.
Very few chuckles.
Very few chuckles.
It's interesting. First off, like you say, Kevin James against type as just a really bad villain.
Yes.
And even the heroine, though, like Becky, isn't exactly pure, I don't think.
No.
Like, there's things with her. I like that I kind of like that, like, we are just kind of thrown into this world. It is frustrating that there seems to be a lot of things that are left out as far as information that would kind of be cool to know.
In the end of this movie, I was frustrated. I was like,
Yeah, there's some real frustration on that level. But, you know, it's an incredibly gory movie. There was one scene in particular involving an eyeball that I could not watch. I had to look away. I'm not a big fan of eye trauma. I think that's come up here.
Long scene.
Yeah, it was a lot of like, I'm not looking, and I looked up like, it's not over yet?
The person I was watching it with, I kept on telling her, close your eyes, and she'd think it's over. And she'd look at it, it's like, no, honestly, I will tell you when this is over. It is a very, very long scene.
It's odd, though. Like, there are, like, small doses of heart in this film. Particularly with a gigantic man in this movie.
Yes.
Like, there's, like, small doses of heart.
But at the same time, you're talking about Apex, played by Robert Mallow, who's a Canadian wrestler.
Yeah, former Kurgan in the WWE.
He's about 7 foot tall.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I had, and this isn't like a really depth movie. This is pretty shallow.
Yeah.
They killed some security guards, and those security guards were not 7
No,
foot tall
those
wrestlers,
uniforms were not
but
fitting.
The fitting, it ended up fitting.
Uniform.
He had wardrobe changes, and no one in the area is 7 foot tall.
Yeah. I know
Same
this.
thing with Kevin James. He's a big guy.
You know what's odd though, as my wife and I are watching this movie, is since my wife and I were dating, she always I compared me to Kevin James. And we watched King of Queens. A couple of big guys, very good looking. In this movie, that man is bald with a black beard. I'm like, oh boy, I'm one inappropriate tattoo away from getting him again.
No matter how much you might want to, for Halloween, please do not.
No, I will not.
Okay,
I have the orange jumpsuit,
We'll get you at the mobile.
There's a lot of like whys and hows in this movie that I wish I knew a little more, and that really kind of brings down what I like these movies that are just like crazy violence, I just wish there was more meat to the bone on this thing.
Me too.
It would have been really cool to have it fleshed out just a little bit more. So I don't know. What do you give Becky?
I felt the same. I gave it a 2.5. I thought it was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. Yeah. It really needed to be something different. And besides Kevin James being a villain, I wanted something more different than that.
Yeah, I agree. I gave it a little bit higher. I gave it a 3 because it was entertaining, but it could have been much better.
Yeah. With
just a little more work on it.
Yeah. That is weird. Yeah. I scored a horror movie lower than you.
How about that? The next movie we have is a Romanian film that is found on Hulu. It's called The Whistlers, written and directed by Corneliu Porumbu. Don't wait. It stars a man named Christy, played by Vlad Ivanov. Christy is a cop who's also a whistleblower for the mafia. He's kind of double dipping here, playing both sides, and he is under constant surveillance by the police in Romania. Meanwhile, the mafia are kind of using him to get a man named Zolt out of prison because he's the only person knows where the 30 million euros is stashed. And so to get around the constant suspicion and surveillance that he is under, Christy is sent to this remote island to learn this secret language of whistles to communicate. Yeah, he's going to become a whistler. That way he can communicate without the police being able to understand what he's saying and all of this. Along the way, he falls for a lady named Gilda, played by Katrin Almerian, who starts out as his kind of assigned partner. The mafia assigns her to him to help teach him the language of whistles and such. And this film is told in kind of several small chapters, kind of depending on which character Christy is kind of heavily involved in at that moment. And they're titled, each chapter is titled that character's name. Like, here's Gilda, here's Zolt, here's Magda, who is the kind of the head of the police, who's really suspicious about everything and everyone. And it's told in this way that's interesting, and there's some comedic undertones to this film, I think, that are kind of interesting. And really, this film is a series of twists and turns and double backs, and we've exposed you. Wait a minute. What about if I do this?
I found it difficult to figure out who was actually like the good
Sure.
guy.
Yep.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I know Christy's mom was a good person.
Yeah,
That's about it.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think all of these twists and turns paid off. And that kind of frustrates me with movies like that. We've talked about that many times in the past. When you just start spinning me in circles. Like, all right. I think the performances are good. I really like Vlad Ivanov in this. I thought he was interesting as this kind of just guy who's trying to navigate the waters of playing both sides, and he really knows he's getting busted by both of them probably at some point.
I liked Gilda, played by Carcino.
Marion,
Marlon. Yeah, Marion. And I thought she was fantastic. With Vlad, I wanted some more reaction. I wanted to kind of figure out what his connections is to people. He seemed to have a constant nothing.
I think that's his role, though, is like the hardened cop who now decided to kind of turn is, just emotionless. He's in it for money, and then he's in it for love, maybe,
I couldn't tell, though.
Right. There's some
at the end, that's when I was like, oh, maybe they were, I don't know.
There's some things I love about this. First off, the movie opens with Iggy Pop's The Passengers in the opening credits, and I'm like,
cool.
I like this. Where's this going? There's some very obvious homages in this movie. The Searchers, we're literally watching them watch The Searchers for a while.
Yeah.
There's a very obvious homage to Psycho in here. You can tell that the filmmaker's like, I got some movies that I enjoy. Let's put them in here.
I think for the director, what I felt like he excelled in, a lot of these shots were absolutely beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Even just like rooms, just the way lights were gleaming off the objects around him. It seemed like he took a lot of time making sure that the sets were visually pleasing at all times. There wasn't just a point where he would only tell story. He wanted to have a visual feast at the same time.
Sure.
That I really appreciate a lot.
Yeah.
It was interesting to watch all the way through.
He's a good director, and normally I think his storytelling is much stronger. He has a film that I saw a few years ago called Police Adjective. It's like a really, really interesting movie. A lot of intrigue in there. There's another one, 12 East to Bucharest. That one's really interesting. I think he was kind of missing on some of the storytelling in this movie.
Does he usually tell his stories in chapters like this?
No.
Okay.
No. I don't remember them being told in that way. But it feels like I don't know, I was expecting a little bit more. Like I said, this was showing at the Film Fest this year, and we were very excited to go see this, and obviously didn't, because it was a good trailer, and he's an interesting director, and it looks great. But I think that it was just something was missing there for me to really make it really interesting. And a lot of it did feel like I was spending a lot of time trying to catch up on who's doing what, why, where, what's going on?
Yeah.
Maybe that's just the theme of this week for me. Is I felt like
Confusion.
lost in some of these scripts. I don't know. What did you end up giving The Whistlers?
I gave it a 3. I liked it. I don't think I'll revisit it.
Yeah.
When I see the director's name again, I probably wouldn't be like, oh, I need to see this again because of this film.
Yeah.
But I'll give it another try. I don't know.
I honestly don't remember what I officially gave this. Did I give it a 3 or a 3.5? What does that say up there on the screen?
3.5.
How about that?
You liked it. You liked it a lot.
It's amazing how quickly you forget your scores. All right, sir, let's move ahead to what I would call the big movie of the week.
This is the huge movie. This is actually a play that they recorded back in 2016. It is a huge deal. This is Hamilton, written by Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah.
This is a retelling, well, not a retelling. It is kind of imagining of what if, kind of like the show that we recently watched, Hollywood. What if the founding fathers were all great people and abolitionists, and mainly focusing on Alexander Hamilton and his life gaining political esteem, falling in love. He's a brilliant man. He has some foibles. Most of them are with his relationships with women, and his conflict he had with Burr. This goes over the Revolutionary War all the way up into his death, where he had a duel with Burr.
Right.
The cool thing about this is it's written in a way where it's not as informational, but more of inspiring. And the whole cast, except for King George, I believe, is of non-white people, which kind of gives it an extra different spin on it. There's a lot of things in history that I had problems with. I have this with other movies. I've mentioned it before, where I don't like it when people rewrite things because so many people believe this to be the true thing. And I'm not going to get into that part. The part that I want to express is he had an idea of, wouldn't this be great? And how he incorporated this play was awesome. To have a non-white cast do something so phenomenal.
Yeah.
The dancing was great. All the music was great. It is song from beginning to end, and it's such a fast pace. It boggles my mind on how these actors could have that energy every night to do something like this. And maybe it's because it is a fantastic play.
I mean, it just has to be fun. I mean, I've been listening to this soundtrack for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because it's a phenomenal soundtrack. The family went and saw this when they came here to town, but that was not this cast. This is the original cast, who pretty much, this was towards the end of their run with it. Just a really cool filmed stage production. They took 3 performances, and it puts you on the stage with them, and the angles that you're able to get. And you're on stage, you're watching the spit fly from King George's mouth. You're watching the expressions that you could never see. No matter how good your seats were, you wouldn't be able to get the detail that you get right here.
Yeah.
And I like that this is what we get, and not a filmed version of this story. That it's just the musical, and we're there, and it's a musical of. I mean, that's what makes Hamilton the most successful musical ever.
Yeah.
Is that Lin-Manuel Miranda did such a great job of digging deep into modern pop culture, mixing it with the history, telling a story interestingly, and that cast is incredible. I mean, it's Leslie Odom Jr. as Aaron Burr is great. I love David Diggs as Lafayette, and alternately as Thomas Jefferson.
I found that confusing.
Did you?
Especially when it came down to Monroe and Hercules.
Yeah.
I was like, well, what's her? Because they
We
really
don't need
did.
Hercules anymore.
Yeah, I was like, that's Hercules. And it wasn't until after a while they were like, no, that's...
I've watched this twice now, and I can't help but just get caught up in just the passion of everybody on that stage. And there's laughs, and there's just moments where you're just on the edge of your seat. This is so much fun. I think that it also, I get what you're saying, where you take history and it's not a direct telling of history, but the way this is done, it makes it accessible, and I think it makes it interesting for people to go and really dig in. What was that? I had no idea about that. I had no idea about that, and maybe go and look it up. Nobody cared about Alexander Hamilton. He was the guy on the $10 bill, and nobody knew who he was.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, now everybody knows who Hamilton is.
But again, they should also do the research so they know exactly who Hamilton is, and understand that this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's. And he was inspired to tell a story that included people that looked like everybody else besides the actual founding fathers. The true stories, there are really dark blemishes that are beyond just womanizing and stuff like that. I mean, really dark blemishes. And that is the problem that I had to try to get over. And it actually took a couple of days for me to get over that.
I think it's remarkable, though, how pertinent this story is in 2020.
Yeah.
It's very pertinent to what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it was great, first of all. This movie was shot a few years ago. They were planning on releasing it later this year. And
it was an October release.
Yeah, let's move it up. 4th of July weekend. Let's put this out. Give the people something. I think it was a brilliant plan to do that.
Yeah.
And everybody I know watched it. That's pretty good.
I think it's the most popular thing. It'll probably be the most popular thing for a while.
Yeah.
This is just a question. Did at any point while you're watching the play, did you just concentrate trying to find out where they took a break so they could breathe or just rest for a little
There's
bit?
no time for that.
No, there wasn't.
Well, this cast is banging these out like 2-3 a day.
Yeah.
I mean, they're rolling for a year and a half straight. It's like a finely high-tuned machine. Like it's like a football team that's just at the peak of their game. And like, all right, roll cameras, let's do this.
On most plays, you still have that 5-second gap where all the people are trying to bring out the new props and stuff. There is not a prop change. There's only a few gaps, and that was when King George came out.
Sure.
But otherwise, they would go a good half hour just not stopping.
Yeah.
They're always singing, always dancing. It's just amazingly crazy.
I love it. It got me again. Like I had finally kind of gotten over humming the songs. About 6 months ago, I went on a run just to listen to the soundtrack. I was like, oh, I kind of burned out. And then here I am last Friday humming these songs again.
Check out the Weird Al Yankovic redo. Yeah, so
Well, I'll always check out Weird Al.
That might cancel it out for you.
Oh no. Curious what you gave Hamilton,
I
sir.
gave it a 4. I really liked it. The only reason why it didn't get higher is because I did struggle with the moral issues.
All right.
But that's it. It is a fantastic play, and definitely you should watch it.
I agree. I think you should watch it. I gave it 5 stars. I can't fault it. I love this thing. Love it. Now, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Is this a movie? Does this count in my year-end listings?
It does
I don't
not.
think it does.
No.
I don't think it does.
No.
But I had a good time watching it.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm looking for these days.
And
Just give me something a good time, please.
And lately, because good movies are not really coming out,
Yeah.
we're just streaming stuff that people have not watched yet.
Right.
This was nice. This was very nice.
Yeah, it's a nice little break. Speaking of a good time, fun, lighthearted movie, let's get into our next chapter of our Summer of Keanu series. This week, we turn to 1991. Kids, open your books to 1991. We're going to My Own Private Idaho. Gus Van Sant wrote and directed this film. This is kind of his big follow-up to his little indie hit Drugstore Cowboy. Film that really showcases his love for music and tales of those who live on the edge of society and don't quite fit in. This stars the late, great River Phoenix as a guy named Mike, as well as Keanu Reeves as a guy named Scott. It's based on the Shakespearean tale of Henry IV. You may or may not notice it. It doesn't matter. It's a tale of a group of young male hustlers who kind of do whatever it takes for money or drugs. And Mike, again, River Phoenix's character, is a drifter of sort who kind of suffers from severe narcolepsy.
Oh, yeah.
A form of narcolepsy in which it seems like anytime he gets excited in any way, he just drops.
Really chose a terrible profession.
Really bad. And his narcolepsy, like when he passes out, and it can be at any time, it's bad. And he's out. And sometimes he wakes up in different states.
Yep.
No idea what's going on. Meanwhile, Scott, Keanu's character, is the son of the mayor. And he's looking at a large endowment in his near future. But right now, he prefers to be a male hustler. And he's out there living on the streets, which infuriates his dad. He and Mike kind of bond in their shared adventures and through abuses that happen to them out on the streets. Mike is searching for his mom, and he kind of always seems to be one step behind her. And Scott joins him as they travel around the globe, even looking for her. And what they find in their travels is kind of what separates them. Scott finds love in another land, and Mike just finds more heartache, unrequited love, emptiness, just bad things. But they can bond over one thing. That is a disdain for a man named Bob. Bob is played by William Reichert, Bob Pigeon, and he's kind of like the leader of this group of young men who are out hustling. He's like this street prophet, leader of young boys.
Yeah.
Like just
comes in and out.
Yeah. He comes in, he's boisterous, he's big, loud. Everyone has a feeling about Bob. You can tell Bob's kind of done things to all these guys that just are not great. And they kind of fight back against him, these two. They decide to kind of call him out for what he is.
Yeah.
It's a tough movie, right?
It is very tough. I was curious if you did this on purpose because you picked out when we were going to watch this. And we just did Hamilton, which is a movie that's really a play. And this is a play. This is Henry IV.
Yes.
It's 3 Shakespeare plays, all kind of crammed together. Was that planned?
Yeah, I'm brilliant.
Oh, you are brilliant.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
This was difficult. It was a hard translation going from Shakespeare play to what is considered a cult film right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the performances by River Phoenix was fantastic. I really did.
Man, every time I watch this, I'm like, man, River Phoenix was so great.
He was great.
So young when he died.
But it was so tough to watch. It felt like I was watching a play that wasn't being translated well.
Yeah.
That one weird fight scene where they're like underneath that bridge,
Mm-hmm,
and they're like, oh, these, and it's like, couldn't you tell that these two people were,
Nope.
part of your, no. And then they would go in and out of modern English to actual quotes from the Shakespeare play.
Yep.
It just, and some of the motivations were turning on a dime, because in a play that works. In a movie, it doesn't quite as
I always
well.
think it's interesting when suddenly like they get into the big like Shakespearean language of it all. Like Gus Van Sant just like, just throw that in too.
There's one point where I'm like, who wrote this terrible dialogue? And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, plays I did not watch.
I think it's a film that's very of its time of early 90s independent film.
Yeah.
Very much so. I think it emphasizes what a great talent River Phoenix was.
And during that time, we were redoing Shakespeare plays.
Sure.
and
Oh,
movies
yeah. Big time.
all over
Big
the
time.
place.
Also, look, last week we were talking about it, kind of joking about it, but there is a thank you at the end of the film to the B-52s.
Nice.
At the end of the credits, thanks to the B-52s. And I think it's just another building block, because this is kind of our series about Keanu. I think it's another building block of Keanu kind of building his acting chops.
Yeah.
You kind of just see he's kind of putting things together, and shows his penchant for indie films that kind of interest him. Like he does, like, I'll do a blockbuster, then I'm going to do 3 indie films.
And every time I watch one of these, I do read a little bit more about Keanu Reeves. He's a great guy, and I think
Really
interesting
guy.
We're going to have to talk more about all the cool things Keanu as a real person does when we get closer to the end of our series.
Who knows when that end will come? But I know that we're coming close to the end of this show, so before we do, let's thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters The Palace here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for sponsoring Real Reviews. On behalf of Mike, we both really appreciate that. We are big fans of The Palace. Sir, coming soon. Next week, in fact, we've got a really interesting slate of films.
All right.
I'm very excited about this. First off, we have on Apple TV, we have Tom Hanks' new movie, Greyhound.
I've been looking forward to this
His
one.
World War II movie. I'm very excited for this. On Netflix, we have Charlize Theron's new movie, The Old Guard, which is kind of her as an immortal, being compared kind of like to a Highlander type story. Kind of interesting.
Okay.
I'm excited for that. Over on Hulu, Andy Samberg has a new movie called Palm Springs that's getting a lot of talk. It is the movie that set the record for most amount of money paid, I believe, at Cannes or Sundance. Now I have to double check, but it got the most money of any movie to purchase.
Adam Sandberg.
And Andy Samberg. Yeah. Yep.
All right.
That's coming on Hulu. On Amazon Prime, there's a film called Vivarium, which is kind of this surreal film starring Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg. And of course, we're going to continue on with our Summer of Keanu as we talk about The Devil's Advocate, which kind of ties in because, again, I plan all this out. Charlize Theron making kind of like her debut in Devil's Advocate. What? What happened there?
Head blown.
So exciting, so exciting. So it's kind of fun that we got movies with a bunch of big actors coming out this upcoming week. So that's what we'll be talking about in the near future.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
What are we
anyway,
going to do until then?
what are we gonna do until then?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you want to do?
We just, I don't know, sit around.
Just hang out?
Yeah. I pretty much just sleep in my car until we start another one of these shows.
It's a great image. Oh, well, until that time, though, we're talking about all of these fun films. I'm Jameson.
I'm Mike Roth.
Thanks for watching.